Hello and welcome to Wrestling and Everything Coast to Coast. This time with an all-star panel to celebrate show number 200. I am so proud to be part of this show and to have you folks who've been multi-time hosts and guests and great contributors to a big part of the 200 shows that we've done. And just going back to with Evan Ginsberg to how we created this show, and it was all because we were stuck inside with COVID, and we had no place to go, and you were stuck in your apartment and couldn't go anyplace, and I was here at my house with my kids and I couldn't go anyplace, and together, we started to invite guests and invite different people to host, and it's been an amazing legacy that we've had. I want to thank all of you guys and so many other people who weren't able to make the show today that have been multi-time hosts and guests. We've really had a wonderful array of everyone. But for this week, we have the unbelievable Evan Ginsberg. We have the wrestling's premier photographer in Dr. Mike Leno. We have the guy who dove out on me many times in All Pro Wrestling, and that is Kid Chrome, better known as Casey Wood. And we have many talent manager Nikita Brezhnikov, who gave us many great stories of time with Nikolai Volkov and others. So,
hey, the check's all cleared. I'm happy. That's all I can say.
Yes, we really appreciate it. So, Evan had suggested to me that, because we have this unique roundtable, and it's an interesting array of different people that are here. I mean, Evan's a producer and a writer. Mike is a photographer and historian. Casey is an actual wrestler, has been in the ring. And Nikita, is a very experienced manager and also ex-policeman. We all have, a lot of different angles as to why we got here. And so Evan suggested that we talk about what wrestling actually means to us today. And because he has the shortest time frame and the longest mouth, I'll go with Mike Leno for to start with for our
what? No way.
I got to use the laptop because my desktop I got to buy a new desktop. But wrestling means everything to me. Not everything, obviously family and stuff like that, but it's up there as a second. And when it's great, it's very entertaining. I've been able to shoot and write about wrestling, tours of Japan, Mexico, Canada, Europe and stuff, besides most of the territories. And that was my bucket list from around 73, 74. I said, I want to shoot in as many territories as I can. And the only one I didn't make was Calgary. And I ended up making that up when I got hired by the couple of the Harts to come up for Stu Hart's 80th birthday and the 45th anniversary of Stampede Wrestling, December 15th of 1995, and got to stay at the Hart Mansion before they had to sell it after.
But Mike, a bigger question. Why do you like it? Why do you love wrestling so much?
Well, I miss the territories. That was my era. Evan and Nikita got to experience that. But the camaraderie, the friendships with a lot of folks. Evan I've known forever. And through Evan, I got to meet Nikita, and we're all like brothers, the three of us. And, like in the 60s and 70s, we were like pen pals. And soon, around like 1970, 71, a lot of us, including John Arizzi and myself and so many others, Koichi Yoshizawa in Japan, we started taping on cassettes the audio from wrestling shows. So I had people from Winnipeg and Toronto, Montreal, and all over the US, Japan, Mexico, and in the UK sending me tapes, just cassette tapes. A couple sent reel-to-reels of the shows, and that was like our community before there was actual tape, VHS and beta trading in the late 70s on. And a lot of us had fan clubs for wrestlers. I co-ran the Blassie fan club and then ran the Tolis Brothers fan club on my own, etc. And the point of that for me was to express ourselves, producing monthly newsletters. And I was covering, I've said this a million times, wrestling around the globe. I stole from Tom Burke what he was doing with Ring Wrestling Magazine, covering all of these wrestling around the world. So I had very little. If you look at my Tolos Brothers newsletters from the 70s, it was some on them, of course, but mostly I'm covering, I had all these correspondents, 5 in Japan, people, so covering everything going on in wrestling around the world. And it's, it's fun, and it still interests me, keeping touch with everything. I have a hard time, there's just too much to watch. I say that all the time. I don't even get a chance to watch Billy Corgan's NWA as much as I would like, or Court Bauer's MLW, all these great promotions. I don't know what's happening in my home base, where I was Roland Alexander's photographer for All Pro Wrestling. I don't know what Marcus Jacobson, Marcus Mack, I hope he's putting on shows. He was having commission problems, but I don't even know what's going on in Northern California, but I try to keep in touch with all my brothers in wrestling. And that's kind of what it means to me, I guess, are the friendships and just having fun, road trips, stuff like Evan and I kind of babysitting Iron Sheik and some others at various points.
Imagine.
Yeah, and having a lot of fun. I mean, I was basically hired by Shuli Agar to help watch Khosrow Iron Sheik when he was part of the stand-up act for the Ronnie Munn Block Party, this thing that all the Howard Stern writers, it didn't involve Howard, but they were touring around the U.S., and so I made sure that Khosrow of Iron Sheik got to the shows from his hotel, anyway, it's fun, and for someone like him, he had so few people that remembered and could appreciate his amateur background and just talk to him about that instead of his pro stuff. And that's, those are, great memories. So I think that's what wrestling is for most people, and for myself too, are the memories. And maybe for more current people, the memories they see in the ring, Seth Rollins not giving up his title tonight, there's a spoiler. Or in my case, being on the road, with Moolah, who offered me a ride from, Dallas. We went through Oklahoma and to Missouri and Kansas, and she had Vicki Williams and Sandy Parker in the car, and I just shut up and listened to all that stuff. So that's what wrestling kind of means to me, so I don't elongate it too much.
Nikita, Mike, you have something to add.
Well, Mike, what was that like with Vicki and Moolah? Did they get along really good?
There was kind of an odd guardedness, especially with Sandy, and Sandy would later be very outspoken when, Moolah was kind of getting trashed, a number of years ago, not that long ago, and then the dark side followed. You could tell that Vicki was not quite as guarded, but they were careful what they said because Moolah was their boss. Lillian was their boss. But Sandy would tell me horror stories as early as like 20 years ago about what was going on. And so did Debbie Combs, getting locked in their rooms by Lillian. And Vicki later told me she thought Moolah got that from the mistreatment from Billy Wolf and just kind of carried it on when she then took over the women's wrestling business, booking them and doing all of that stuff. And confiscating their money. The promoters would give her the money usually, and instead of what was promised by the promoters to the female workers, they would get far less. Lillian kept it. So I just, they told stories and stuff, but they were far different animals away from Lillian in that time period, 1975, 76, 77. So Vicki and Ann Casey and others in Lillian's camp, they would be it was night and day. And I didn't really know what was going on. Obviously, I didn't know then in the 70s. And I got along great, with Moolah, but she was the dominant person in the car, and everybody deferred to her.
So let's find out what and Evan, I also kind of want to phrase it as a question. I mean, you're a teacher, and you're a guy who, is not a huge dude or someone that, would be typically a guy that you would consider a violent person, or you don't always like want to like hit people with chairs or anything like that. You're not an outrageous personality like just someone like myself who's just a frustrated comedian that has no other venue to vent his frustrations other than wrestling. Why wrestling? What makes wrestling something that you care about and spend so much time? That's what I was really trying to get with Mike, but I want to find out from you, Evan, because I've never asked you that question in all the years. What is it about wrestling?
I think when it's done well by a master like a Bryan Danielson or a Will Ospreay or an Okada today or a Terry Funk or Nick Bockwinkel or Harley Race back in the day, I think it's art. I just think you can have a complete suspension of disbelief and get caught up in all of it, and it's a total escape from reality. If you're emotionally invested, you've lost yourself for the evening and you've forgotten whatever problems you have, tragedies you've been through. For that couple of hours, all that really matters is the wrestling. And you could say this about a great movie or great theater or anything that's great.
Music.
Yeah, a great concert, you could get lost in it and just be happy for 2 or 3 hours. So the point that I always come back to is, excuse me, my father died when I was 20. So when I think of wrestling, when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, I think of it as the best nights of my life, going with my father and sharing that with him. And Russell's a big, sports fan. I go with my dad to the 69 and 73 Knicks and the championship ABA Nets. And these are just, some of the greatest memories of your life because you shared it with somebody who's no longer here. And, you talk to any old school fan. I've been watching since the early 70s, attending since 74. That's 50 years. And I tell people some of the best nights of my life were going to professional wrestling. And, when people go, why would an intelligent fellow like you be interested in this? I go, if all you know of wrestling is the circus that Vince turned WWE into, I understand why you would think that, because most of it is garbage. Not that they're not great athletes, they're just forced to, do that silly juvenile product geared towards 8-year-olds who fell on their heads as babies. So we have a lot of guests, so I don't want to be too long-winded, but also, like Mike said, I'm sitting on this show tonight, one with Russell, who, during COVID, except for China, Queens, New York was the epicenter with International Airport, Kennedy Airport. I had 5 friends who died of COVID. I've had adult students who had 10 relatives die of COVID. Queens was devastated. So to come on with Russell, even for an hour a week, and talk about wrestling, the good, the bad, and ugly of wrestling, it was an escape and it was meaningful. And, Nikita and Mike, we go back decades. We've stayed in each other's homes, these guys are brothers to me. So, what else can I say? I've met some of the absolute best people in my life through wrestling. And I've met dirtbags I wouldn't spit on if they were on fire, including promoters that try to stiff, Johnny Valiant and people I was managing, shoot managing like Nikita, booking these guys and working out the payoffs. And, and it was not an easy gig. Like you said, I'm not a wrestler. I'm a mild-mannered English teacher who happens to be involved in wrestling. So I would stand my ground you cocksucker, pay what you told us you're going to pay us. I would just stand my ground, and oh, it wasn't a good house. I go, the place was packed. Every seat was full. Give us what you promised us. And I just wouldn't budge. So, wrestling is a beautiful and ugly world. And while I'm on this topic, before I forget, just very quickly, once again, I want to acknowledge a friend who passed, Francisco Chiazzo, a.k.a. Frankie Capone, who I met in England, of all places, when he was working a show and I was working a convention. I believe it was the year 2000 or 1999. I think it was 2000. And he has a movie called Journeyman with his wife, and basically indie guys just trying to pay the bills, working indies. And he went beyond that. He worked for TNA for a bit and WWE for a bit. But, the poor guy died like so many others. They're doing a GoFundMe to bury him. And it's a tough business, man. A tough business. But
Mike, I realize you have to go.
You know what? I just got an email from Jonathan Schwartz. He said that you wanted him on the show. So
so I'm gonna take you off and put him on, because otherwise we don't have enough room.
What I want you to do, though, Russ, is maybe before the show ends, ask everybody, including yourself, what was the greatest and perhaps worst wrestling match you guys have ever seen.
Quickly tell us which ones you have. Quickly.
Oh, gosh. Jack Briscoe, Dory Funk Jr., Broadway at Kiel Auditorium. And the worst was the Frankenstein monster against a inebriated Andre the Giant who tore his Frankenstein plastic mask off in L.A.
That's something else. All right, we'll see you next week, Mike. Thank you for being part of the show.
Happy 200th show, everyone.
Thanks, Mike. Let me just do very quickly, best and worst match. Best match I ever saw, Flash Steamboat at the Meadowlands. Oh, my God, wrestling elevated the heart. Worst match I ever saw, Ludwig Borger against Lex Luger in the main event on a WWF card. Oh, my God, it was brutal.
Wow. Well, now I want to get back to Casey here. Sorry, Jonathan, we didn't have enough room for everybody with Mike on here as well, and he had to leave.
Mike has a big head. We couldn't fit you in.
Yeah, exactly. So we're adding now Jonathan Schwartz to the conversation, and he's also been a big part of the shows that we've done. And welcome to show number 200. Thank you for joining us tonight. Journalist over at Slam Wrestling and with the Wrestlers Court, and we were just talking about what wrestling means to us, and we're going around the room here. So I'm going to go to Casey next. We'll get to you, Jonathan. So Casey, why don't you? You're the one guy out of all of us who's put your body at risk to entertain fans. Tell us, why'd you do it?
Well, I had to, because I'm so light. I had to do flips and weird shit, but I was at the same time, you know what I mean? Like, because I'm so small, like Wesley Mark, we talked about that before. Such a big guy, to, outmaneuver him and stuff. And then obviously you get cut off and you get your ass kicked. But
why even get in the ring in the first place? Why did you even do wrestling in the first place?
Because when I was a little kid, I saw Portland wrestling on TV and I just fell in love with it. And I saw Dynamite Kid and those guys, in Portland. And I didn't even know about territories back then. I just thought that was KPTV, Portland, Oregon. That's all it was. I didn't know about WWF or NWA, AWA at that time. Until I saw a magazine in the stand, like at 7-Eleven one day. I'm like, oh, there's more wrestling out there, But it's kind of like, for me, it's entertaining, but you curtain, you go out there, you bust your ass, and it's like playing drums. I saw Kiss in 1979 on TV. I wanted to play drums. I saw Dynamite Kid in 1981 in Portland. I wanted to be a wrestler. You want to entertain. It just gets in your blood, and it doesn't go away. That makes any sense.
Wow, that's great. Nikita, tell me, what does wrestling mean to you? You've been all over the place doing wrestling, and you've traveled so many different spots. What does it mean to you to be part of like the fabric of wrestling and wrestling history?
The funny thing for me was that people always say, well, this must have been a dream of yours. I said, well, you a fucking nut? You think I thought I could be doing any of this? There's no way. I was thrilled to just watch it. My father was a bastard. He was abusive, both verbally and physically. For me, wrestling saved me. I heard the kids in school talking about wrestling. So I said, all right, I'm going to see what this is. First match I see is Tanaka destroying a jobber. And I'm like, wow, yeah, look at this guy. It's incredible. And then when Strongbow came on, I'm hooked. That was it. It was a kid's or an adult's Disneyland. Still, I was in my teens at the time when I first got involved with it. But when I finally got to the first match, I started watching in 1970. The first night was November 28th of 1973, and it was better than sex. I don't care what anybody says. That was like, man, this is incredible. But it was a battle royal. Andre's first appearance in Baltimore, and when you seen them coming to the ring, I described in my book, it looked like an army marching into battle. But you saw that giant, and it was like, this is incredible. But throughout my years, like you said, police, doing different things, acting. If I talk to a doctor, if I talk to a lawyer, if I talk to anybody, and the word wrestling comes up, their eyes lead up and they start with the stories. It touches more people than they admit. Because when I used to go, I was working for a bond company, was one of my first jobs. And a lot of times people didn't want to let you know that they watched and they went, and you would see them. They're like, don't tell anybody, Monday, that you saw me here. And it's like, why? Proud to be here. This is great. What are you so ashamed of, you goof? But to me, it just grew over the years. When I met a photographer in Baltimore one night, he was selling the 8x10, not 8x10, the whatever that other size is. Mike would know the size. $1 a piece in 1978. And then he and I started to correspond. First thing he tells me is, my Via's going to turn. And I'm like, get the hell out of here. That guy's too nice. He ain't going to turn. And we're watching it. And I'm like, get the hell out of here. And it kind of ruined things. But then it was like, I like it better. It's kind of neat. Now you got the inside on it. Then when I started to sit at ringside and could hear him talking, it was like, okay, you just ignore that. But it made it better. And all these years later, like today is the anniversary that Zbyszko turned on Bruno in 1980. We still talk about that. Which was better, the heel turn of Arion or Zbyszko? We still talk about this shit 50 years later. You think they're going to be talking about Sylvester the Cat and Tweety Bird that's on WWE now in 50 years? They won't talk about it 50 minutes from now. It's like, no, this stuff touched people's hearts, man.
That's really incredible. That's so, Jonathan, let's circle back to you. Now you're a lawyer, and everyone goes, well, you're just too smart to love wrestling so much. Don't you know it's all fake? Why would you follow something that's all fake? You know?
In fairness, I've been working in government and politics for the last 10, 15 years, and I certainly wouldn't necessarily say those are fake, but I will say that real and fake when it comes to pro wrestling, at least to me, doesn't matter. We don't go and talk about the latest Marvel Comics movie or the Transformers movie with the giant 50-foot high CGI robots and say, you know what? I'm not entirely sure that Optimus Prime is actually beating up Megatron right now. So
you don't spend enough time on Facebook.
I for which I'm grateful. But I think that the whole real fake dichotomy thing is silly in wrestling and entertainment in general, and really in a lot of different facets of life. It's something that's enjoyable. It's something that's fun. I used to think of it as an excuse for me to turn my brain off. That was kind of the intellectual rationalization for why I liked it so much, that on some level, primary process, fun to just turn the brain off and watch a couple of dudes in their underwear pretend to hit each other. Now I think that's unfairly reductive and really takes away from a kind of entertainment that I truly enjoy and have since I was a kid. And now that I've got my own kids and watching it through their eyes, I mean, even acts that I necessarily wouldn't have fallen in love with, like John Cena, for example. But watching him play superhero to a new generation of kids, and I think that's kind of missing from wrestling right now, but hopefully they'll get back to it. For me, that's a lot of the fun. I know people tend to think of wrestling as a soap opera writ large, or a soap opera for guys. I think that's kind of a mistake. I think wrestling is comic books brought to life. You've got the music, you've got the flash, you've got the color, you've got people flying from pillar to post, you've got feats of strength, you've got good vanquishing evil. To me, from the time I'm a little kid to being a grown man to having my own kids, to me, that's what's ultimately most enjoyable about it. And you can have, and the other thing is, you can come at it and find stuff to enjoy from pretty much any angle. If you're the sort who enjoys a 5-star Dave Meltzer kind of 45-minute match, great. If you're into the death match scene, you've got people hitting each other with light tubes for 30 years now. Not my thing, but I get that other people like it. If you think wrestling hasn't improved since Bruno Sammartino and Chief Jay Strongbow's time, you can still access an amazing amount of that content online. There's any number of different ways to get into it, and there's a place for everyone. And I'll finish off by just mentioning one thing. Since Nikita was talking about the doctors and the lawyers who were into it as well. When I first started working on the policy side, not in government, but I was working as a lobbyist. And I happened to drop a wrestling reference in a meeting, because I do that because I'm silly sometimes. And the meeting stopped dead. And I thought, oh my God, I just made some ridiculous reference that nobody's going to get, and I'm going to get fired tomorrow. I get pulled aside by the CEO of the organization the next day. And he asked me, do you know Athol Layton? And I started in on a conversation about wrestling in Hamilton, which is a city in Ontario quite near Toronto. And it turned out that the CEO, the chairman of the organization I was working for, the guy who was in charge of our media work, the political the political lobbyist guys who hobnobbed at Queen's Park, which is where the provincial government is located. Pretty much everyone in that building of consequence was a wrestling fan. And it wasn't widely known, but amongst us, we all kind of knew what was what. And beyond that, it turns out that an awful lot of politicians are also fans, including the current Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford. So I think it's everywhere. I think it's as fun as you allow it to be. And I think that if you followed any political election in the last 5-10 years, I think you've actually seen a lot of wrestling content.
It's the same shit. Behind the curtain, all friends. Out on television, they hate each other. Same bullshit. I used to work local government for 27 years. I saw what went on. It's
you know what I'm talking about.
It's the same, just like wrestling. Don't even start.
That's great.
Although I will say, if you followed Trump's 2016 campaign at all, man, did he lift stuff directly from WWE.
Yeah, he did.
He was pulling entrances with him coming out from under the stage.
He's in the Hall of Fame.
Reagan did. Reagan did. Lee Atwater was a huge fan of pro wrestling, and he used lots of pro wrestling psychology to whip people up and crowds up the same way Trump has, and to some extent even.
And Biden and the whole bunch of bullshit and bastards, they all do the same thing. Ain't no one different than the other. You shake your hand, you better count your fingers because you're going to be missing a couple.
So,
but
that's cynical.
Hold on, Russell, hold on.
Sure.
For the bastards that use the F word, I wish they could have been at the Hamburg Fieldhouse and see Dominic DeNucci with a walker and Tony Atlas with a cane. That's how fake it is. Okay, look
Right.
at their foreheads. You know, it's like, yeah, it's got to be predetermined because if you didn't control it, it would be every night there'd be a new champion. It would
Yeah,
it'd
I've
be
had Casey's boot land right on my head from about 12 feet up on a dive out. And I can tell you, that was a real boot, really hitting my head on a real dive out. And the impact was real, you know. And Casey can tell you all about, you know, what it's like to take a clothesline from Mark Smith or
The
or,
thing that
you know.
bugs me
Ask
too,
anybody that had a match with George Steele. They'll tell you, oh, God, please, not another one, because that bastard's stiff.
busted my ass in APW boot camp, you know, to turn pro. When I walk, my knees crack and wake my wife up at night. My neck is cracked. That's not fake. Predetermined.
Yeah, no,
we
you,
get that.
you've definitely
But
survived
stuff
it.
happens. You know, you take bumps every single night.
And back then, when you were wrestling, the power bomb was still
I'm not
really
complaining, though.
fashion. You know,
Gorilla Monsoon said it best. There's two ways to land, lucky or unlucky. That's it.
There you
And
go.
hey, bang, zoom. I mean, what the hell is there? A little bit of a mat? That's it?
Yeah.
My favorite
Well,
line on
is-
that is
what
Johnny
is-
Valentine's. I may not be able to convince you that pro wrestling is real, but I sure as hell can convince you that I am.
Talk to
That's
Dr. Schultz. He'll convince you.
and that's a perfect segue to why I love wrestling. And I guess maybe I could have gone first, and then I would have been able to you guys took some of my thunder and said some of the things that I obviously love about wrestling, like the fact that it's a huge comic book and something like that. But I've thought a lot about this question, you know, because I've devoted a lot of my life to wrestling and the show and all of that stuff. And why do I like wrestling so much? And I really thought about it a lot over the weekend, and I've been thinking a lot about it today. If I boil it all down, I think you guys will agree. There's nothing more human than wrestling. It encapsulates what makes people fascinated and what people want to see. It gives the audience what they really want so much, but are afraid to admit that they really like it. It's the Twinkie of sports, that you don't want to like it, you don't think you should like it, but once you bite into it, you want another one.
And you always get your money's worth. You may see a blowout in baseball or football, but when you leave the
You'll be
wrestling arena,
entertained.
you were enjoyed.
By the right product, you will get 3 hours of entertainment and stuff that you will look back on and say, you know, do you remember, like when I went to Arco Arena and saw the first Royal Rumble out there in Sacramento? I mean, it wasn't the first Royal Rumble, it was the first one that Sacramento ever had. And that was the Razor Ramon versus Bret Hart match as the main event. It was awesome. That was awesome to see live. It was amazing to see a major event and to be there for WrestleMania 2 and to be part of what is now to see something go from what it was in the 70s and the fact that it was a cult kind of thing and it was an inside thing and it was something that you and just a few friends really loved, that you stayed with and watched it grow and get bigger and more mainstream. And it went from being something that was just every once in a while on TV, if you were lucky enough to find it, to being something that was on regularly, weekly, being something that now, you know, got its own network, you know, to see people that want to become wrestlers from the day they're born almost and devote their life to being in the business, and to know that you can be a part of that and part of that huge, crazy quilt of twisted, bizarre family that makes wrestling what it is. I mean, in any other circumstance, me and Casey would have never met. We would have never run into each other. I would have never met Mark Smith. I would have never met Donovan Morgan or Mike Modest or a variety. I would have never even virtually met you, Nikita, you know, or you, Jonathan. True. I haven't been to Canada since I was like 12 years old. So, you know, I wouldn't run into any of these people if it wasn't for wrestling. And when I when we would be done with a wrestling show. You know, it would be when you first get there for a wrestling show, you'd be all excited. You'd be seeing all these people you haven't seen in a long time. It's almost like being with family and like going through a family dinner. You know, by the middle of the dinner, you'd be like throwing stuff at other people and wanting to choke them, you know, for various reasons because they piss you off so much. And
I was
you'd
going to
say
say there
to
might
yourself,
actually be less violence at the wrestling card.
yeah, exactly. The stuff backstage sometimes is more explosive than what's going on in the ring.
That's
And
for sure.
then you say to yourself, like during the whole thing, then you kind of band together as a group because it's you against the audience to some extent. You know, are the fans even going to show up? You know, who booked this thing? You know, you know, you have that nervousness, and then the curtains go up and it's showtime, and you have your role, and you are being that person in that role, and you're making the whole machine happen. And then in the end, people applaud you. Or they boo you, but they applaud you mostly at the end because you entertained them. And that keeps you coming back.
Go
Because-
and watch Wrestling Then and Now. Go and watch that movie, Wrestling Then and Now. Evan, I know you two
it's
humble to
advertised at
mention
the end
it.
of our show. We have we've been advertising Wrestling Then and Now every show that we have.
That explains everything. And I feel sorry for the casualties. Like Evan and I were in Indianapolis. I call it the rainy night in Indianapolis, October 23rd, 2003. This poor guy, he and his girlfriend put their money together. They were going to put on this great show. 5,000 people they were expecting. I'm there with Nikolai, Evan's there with Johnny. We're like, hey, this will be great. The poor bastard, it rained. It was like Noah's Ark time. Then it was the first night of the World Series. He lost his ass. It's like, you don't hear.
And he lost his girlfriend.
Yeah, that too. My God. And it's like, that's one of 1,000 that have tried to be a part of this in some way. If they can't get in the ring, then they're going to promote a show to be a part of it. And they gave up a lot of money. I don't know if some of them maybe recovered from it. It was horrible.
I have seen one person after another burn through 100 grand, 200 grand. Gordon Scazzeri burned through 2 inheritances. Close friend of mine. I was at his memorial. He ended up dying in a welfare hotel. Okay? So I have a love-hate relationship with everything wrestling because I've seen it destroy marriages, destroy lives, destroy frienships for sure. But
we still do it. You know, we still commit ourselves to it. We have the injuries. We have we sit through the bomb scares. You know,
So my first,
It's like getting married. We know you're going to put a gun in your mouth, but you still do it anyway.
But I would hop on a plane. I would hop on a plane tomorrow and visit one of you guys. You see that?
Yeah,
That- oh, really?
$5.
$5. What'd you do with all that money?
yeah,
I never cashed it. I just had to frame it.
it's true.
Yeah.
It's and yet people are possessed to continue to basically kill themselves to be part of this business and to risk everything in order.
Let me say something else. I've done a little indie managing, and I've been on the road with the indie guys, and it's almost like a surrogate family for some of them. Like Nikita was saying, sometimes, there was some really, brutal family dynamics, and the surrogate family was the promoter and the promoter's wife and the wrestlers. And I've even heard older wrestlers referred to the younger wrestlers. This is my wrestling son, my wrestling daughter. It's a surrogate family for many. So unfortunately, when somebody leaves the business, 90% of those people you'll never hear from again, if not more. So, there's a good, bad, and ugly to all of this.
Jonathan, since you've never actually been with a Fed, do you ever feel like you're kind of an outsider always looking in on this kind of family dynamic, or how do you feel that you get involved, or as a writer, does that make you feel connected?
Well, I think it's become a theme over the year and a bit that I've been writing about it, and it's something that's always interested me. As Evan was saying it, I know, for example, uh, Vince McMahon is not the most popular person around this table, and I think not necessarily with most people who've been following wrestling inside and out for any length of time, given some of the decisions that he's made over the years. But one thing that kind of comes through over and over and over again, I recently wrote a column about wrestlers who kind of left WWE and came back after a period of estrangement. And one of the themes that kept coming up was that part of the reason things got so bad, particularly for younger talent, was that they wound up seeing Vince as a surrogate father, and that they had what they considered a really close relationship with him until things ended and they displeased him, or the contract ran up, or there was a better offer elsewhere, and that relationship was broken for whatever length of time. And the wrestlers take it very seriously. It was one thing in across the Ultimate Warrior story arc. Across Bret Hart, he claims that at one point he saw he saw Vince as a second father. Hulk Hogan has said it in his autobiography. Bruno obviously wouldn't, because he had a contentious issue more with Vince Sr. even than he did with Jr. And yet
Bret
he's
Hart
still
said it too.
sorry.
Bret Hart said it too.
No, I
And the Iron Claw is all about family.
I think I mentioned Bret, but
Okay, sorry.
John Cena has said it more recently. Batista. I mean, the list of people who kind of see this person who, from what we see from the outside, can be absolutely Machiavellian in the way that he deals with people, and yet you've got generations of wrestlers lining up to work for him, generations of wrestlers notwithstanding some pretty unsavory things that have become established public fact, talk about what a great guy he is and how well he takes care of the people in his life. And I'm watching Raw out of the corner of my eye right now, and it's still there. And Triple H has cut now is that he stepped into more of that kind of creative role, is getting, they're saying the same thing about him. I think it's a little bit different because he comes from more inside as a performer himself. And he seems to have changed the way that the culture within WWE, at least somewhat. I don't know how much, but the whole idea of family net fascinates me. So far as not having any specific indie cred, look, if I'm going to be perfectly honest, if Tony Khan called today and offered me a writing gig with AEW, I would be there with bells on. I would take the same silly risks as anybody else did, and it would mean an awfully interesting conversation with my wife, but I would go for it. I'm just mindful. I mean, if I had an opportunity to step into the ring as a manager, I would love to do that. I think I'm past the point where I could reliably take a bump and not file an insurance claim with Lloyd's, but I would totally give that a shot as well. So I think anybody who kind of gets into it past a certain point, the bug is there. The wrestlers all talk about it. The wrestlers all talk about that need to kind of be in front of an audience and perform and bask in the glory of the crowd, no matter how big the crowd might be. And for somebody from the outside, of course, it sounds appealing. I don't know that I'm willing to make some of the trade-offs that a lot of these people do seem to make, but within the bounds of what I know I'm capable of doing, heck, why not?
Evan, what's the smallest crowd we ever were in front of?
That crowd in Jersey where we were with Nikolai and Johnny, and there was one paid customer. Yeah.
One paid.
And Johnny kept going, how come there's no signs anywhere in this town for this event? There's no signs. Because they were from the old school where you'd plaster the town with signs, you know?
Right.
Yes.
Pre-internet. This was 25 years or so ago. Yeah.
Oh my God!
The smallest show I ever did was 9. We had over at Petaluma. The SPW did a show out there, and the wrestlers outnumbered the audience, and it's always pretty difficult, you know, when that happens. It becomes almost like they were doing some, just in the ring, they were just like slap fighting each other because they had no I didn't care anymore what the 9 people thought in the audience.
You don't mind if somebody's trying, but these bastards were shysters, because even Johnny was like, well, wait. Where's the money going to be? Where do you get? Oh, well, my wife, she's going to go get the money. It's like, okay, so what's stopping her? Where are we going to see this money? Come on, because it was getting to the point. Now, Johnny was funny. He got on the mic. He entertained everybody. He kept us loose, but it's like, this isn't good. And luckily for us, okay, Evan's there, Johnny's there, Nikolai and I were having fun. My wife, Victoria, we all had a great time. But, you didn't get what you were promised. But how many times before you get that plane ticket, it's like half the money and the plane ticket, or I'm going to stay home. But then, of course, you got the other end of the stick where guys, they'll get there and they want more money. And that happens too. Own worst enemies. They kill the golden cow sometimes. So
I was at an indie show in England. I won't name names, but a name wrestler picked up the promoter in the dressing room off his feet and said, "You're gonna give me and my manager, more money." And he actually lifted the promoter off his feet. I'm watching it. So yeah, man, it could be rough out there, rough. But you weren't at the one in Atlanta. There was a convention in Atlanta where they paid Johnny half up front and the plane ticket, and they paid me and a plane ticket, and there was like nobody there. So I said, Johnny, I don't know where these guys are going to come up with the money for everybody, and they didn't. So I said to Johnny, whatever you sell at this table, just put the money in your pocket, because you are not going to get your fee. And that's exactly what happened. So,
Well, Indianapolis, I was watching. I said, Nikolai, what the hell? He's like, uh-oh. I said, I'm going to get to the money. So I knocked on the door, and then the guy's like, I got to give you 5s, 10s, and 1s. I said, I don't care if you got to give us change. Give us the money. And then I tell Evan, you better go get Johnny's money, because we were about the only 2 that got paid. But then the guy's mother came with a checkbook. But that's when Cornette got a little goofy. He starts screaming and hollering and making it's like, gives a shit. I know bad checks in the wrestling business, it's bad, because a lot of times they're going to bounce. But try it. This guy's doing the best he can, and see what the hell. Because Cornette he had all these people there, and it was
the Midnight Express there.
The Midnight Express, and it was like, this guy overbooked without a doubt. But he was planning on 5,000, and he got 50. I don't even know if he got 50. But
this guy did everything you could possibly do wrong. Prior to the convention and show, he had these guys in town doing appearances
the day before,
signing autographs. Okay,
yes.
So then it was a torrential downpour, and also was the first night of the World Series, and the team was local, so everybody was home watching the World Series. So you couldn't have planned anything worse than this poor guy. He was a nice enough guy. I mean, but he took.
We have a few minutes left. Let's go around the room now. Mike suggested that we all quickly talk about our favorite match and what he considers the worst match. Let's find out from Casey what he feels was his favorite match.
Well, I'm a big Barry Windham fan, and I like the worldwide Ric Flair Barry Windham match a lot.
Froze again.
Oh, you can go on that stuff. Worst match? I have to think about that one. That could be. I don't want to.
Well, we'll get back to Nikita.
Since I'm a Strongbow fan, the Chief against Superstar, August 27th, 1977, I was just over the moon. And that was the best. The worst match, January 23rd, 1984, Hulk Hogan beats the Iron Sheik, and that's the day the music died.
A lot of people do think that's a big moment. Jonathan.
It is.
I'm going to give you 3 just because I can't decide. First one, Steve Austin versus Bret Hart at WrestleMania 13. In my view, still the all-time best WrestleMania match ever. Even in my view, I prefer it to Savage Steamboat, which was itself an excellent match. Hulk Hogan versus The Rock at WrestleMania 18 for no other reason than I happened to be in the cheap seats for that one. And it was, whether it was a brilliant technical match or not, I have never been part of a crowd that blew the roof off of the Skydome like that. It was incredible. And most recently, I would add CM Punk versus MJF in AEW to that list. Very different circumstance, but I think that the story behind Punk coming back and the fact that they gave MJF an incredible Batman villain kind of origin story for that, it was some of the best. And I know people don't necessarily like this word, but it was an example of pro wrestling storytelling done absolutely beautifully. So those would be my favorites. Least favorite match that I can think of would be anything involving a McMahon.
Interesting. Very interesting. Evan.
Well, I already said Flash Steamboat at the Meadowlands, Night of Champions, tremendous.
What about in person? The best match?
That was in person. Oh,
wow.
I was at the Garden for Tiger Mask and Dynamite Kid. That was like...
That was going to be one of the ones I listed, yes.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's a great
I was at the Garden when Snooker jumped off the cage on Morocco. I wouldn't say it was the greatest match, but it was the greatest moment. There was a highlight. There was a sea of flash cubes that went off. It's like, in my brain for eternity, that image. And the people just roared for like 5 minutes after. It was unbelievable. And I used to love seeing Bruno and Billy Graham. It was like, Batman and the Joker. It was like Superman and Lex Luthor. The building would shake. So one night, you could see this on Peacock. One night, Graham's wrestling Bruno, and Graham goes like, "I quit," and he goes back to the dressing room. Monsoon was the ref. Next thing you know, Monsoon puts him over his shoulders, dumps him in the ring. Bruno pounces on him. It was like the Roman Coliseum. I mean, it was like this bloodlust. It was crazy. So, yeah,
that was for the Son of Sam while he was terrorized, because that was August the 1st of 77. They both bled. Monsoon was the ref. He had the white shirt. It was beautiful. Call us demented, sadistic. We loved blood, and it was real fucking blood. No bullshit.
And I was there for Terry Funk and Ric Flair. I Quit live. That was unbelievable. I was there for Eddie Gilbert and Cactus Jack. Eddie Gilbert and Terry Funk in Philly. Oh my God! Some of the matches I saw live. Abdullah and Brody I saw live. Wild.
So for me, it was definitely, as I said, the Royal Rumble match for me. To see live was the Bret Hart versus Razor Ramon match. That was really an amazing match to watch. Unfortunately, the worst match that I ever saw was my pal and guy who's been on the show, Tony Jones. He was the local squash talent to go up against Snitsky, and the ring entrance was longer than the match itself. The match itself, he kicked Tony Jones in the stomach, put him up for the power bombed him, and 1, 2, 3. It was about a 45-second match, so not good. And I would also say anything that features Uncle Elmer in it is not going to be on my highlights or the Ding Dongs.
I was at the God. I was at the Garden the night Backlund lost to Kevin Nash in like 10 seconds. That bordered on consumer fraud. That was ridiculous.
Now, Uncle Elmer was, as Plowboy Frazier, was pretty damn good in the South. But that Uncle Elmer bullshit, forget it. That was dumb, just beyond dumb. And then Cousin Junior and Cousin Francis. Oh, stop that shit already.
It's too bad, because Hillbilly Jim is a really nice guy. I once talked to him on the phone for a while.
Very nice guy, very laid back.
Yeah, but the rest...
But they brought in Uncle Elmer and Cousin Luke and Cousin Junior and all the rest of them because shortly after Hillbilly Jim debuted, he wound up, I think he blew out a knee or something.
Yes, fell
off a ladder or something.
Yeah, fell off a ladder. But so let me close this out by show 200 by asking you guys, what do you want to see happen in the future here? What do you want to see in 2024 and beyond? Evan.
In wrestling or on this
Yeah.
show?
In wrestling.
I would like to see the fans, instead of being corporate apologists, say, you know what? Wrestling shouldn't cost $63 to $597 for WWE at a house show. It's disgusting greed, and not be money marks and, you know, whatever they ask, just here's my money, like a religious pilgrimage to WrestleMania 40, where they have VIP ringside seats starting at $23,000 packages. I mean, they have Raw at the Barclays in Brooklyn coming up. The tickets start at $115 on top for a Raw, a TV taping, and they have VIP packages for $1,400 for a Raw taping.
So P.T. Barnum was wrong. There's 10 born every minute.
Yeah.
50,000 born every minute.
You reach a point where you've eliminated the blue collar fan. You can't afford to take a family of 4 when the tickets start at $115. It's like basketball or the NFL.
Oh God, I know. Yeah, hockey. I mean, son of a bitch.
Yeah, but that's universal. I mean, forget wrestling or sports. I mean, have you seen what concert tickets costs now?
Yes.
I know she's not necessarily the top draw for this room, but Taylor Swift is coming through Toronto next year.
Oh yeah, get ready for that.
And tickets start at $600.
But you want to know something, Jonathan? I read that
you're a Taylor Swift fan.
I could take her or leave her. I'm an R&B fan, but anyway, at Taylor Swift concerts, they have people wearing adult diapers so they don't miss a note and have to stand on line for the women's room. Okay, yeah. So you reach a point where there's a thin line between insane and fan. It's really, once you get to that point where you're going to wear a diaper to go to an event, I think you've crossed the line. And I have been hearing murmurs that a lot of these wrestling fans spending thousands of dollars, they're maxing out their credit cards, and not everybody's rich. They don't all have thousands of dollars to make a religious pilgrimage to a wrestling event. I was physically at the AEW World's End pay-per-view a couple weeks ago, and the tickets were $36 to $479. And it was a mediocre show. It was mediocre. So my friend who has money, he's a dentist, he spent over $500 between tickets, food, and parking to see a mediocre wrestling show. So not everybody can afford that. It's a little ridiculous.
Nikita, what would you like to see going in the future for wrestling?
A legitimate Hall of Fame building with legitimate wrestlers inducted. That would bring substance finally and say, you know what? Now people can come and look and relive and be marveled and pay homage to those who gave up the body over the years.
And Drew Carey and Kid Rock not welcome.
No bullshit football players. You have to have been a wrestler, period. You had to be Bruno sanctioned. That's it. If Bruno wouldn't have sanctioned you, then get the fuck out.
I would love that. Jonathan.
Okay, so first, if Bruno was going to sanction you, that means Lou Thesz and Buddy Rogers are out.
Who cares? Get it.
Okay.
I can think of some angry St. Louisians.
Let them in. He'd let them in.
First off, I would like a $1,500 Undertaker autograph, please. Secondly, I think there's two things that I would really like to see. I would like to see increased competition, more promotions succeeding, more spots for talent up and down the card, more money for everybody. The other thing, so from my perspective, that's what makes pro wrestling healthiest. The other thing that I would really like to see, and I know I'm likely in a minority on this one, is finally let's get some kind of collective agreement going for wrestlers, at least at the WWE and AEW level. I think it's been a theme certainly since I've been coming on the show. It's something that's come up with all of us. How many wrestlers wind up not looked after by the time their careers are over? They wind up working, having difficulty finding employment. They certainly have trouble finding insurance, and they wind up spending their twilight years in really, really, really bad shape. The fact, for example, that superstar Billy Graham died with a GoFundMe to cover his continuing medical costs just isn't acceptable. And I don't know that you can count on the largesse of the Tony Khans and the Triple H's and the Vince McMahons of the world. I think history shows that you absolutely can't, even though on occasion they will chip in where they see fit. I think you need some kind of representation across the board to help make that happen. I've never understood, if you want to look at wrestling as a sport, baseball, football, hockey, basketball, all unionized. If you want to look at wrestling as entertainment, you've got SAG-AFTRA looking after stage and TV and screen and theater and all these. I'm not saying it's practical to do it for every indie fed out there, but I think certainly at a level where you've got a network TV presence and you're selling millions of pay-per-views at $50 to $100 a pop, I think it's reasonable to find some kind of collective protection for the people who break their backs to give us the show.
Bravo.
Casey, what do you want to see in wrestling in 2024 and beyond?
I agree 100% about the prices and everything.
Yeah, I agree too with all this. But you have anything else that you'd like to see?
Yeah. Go back to what he said, and that's my answer. I agree with him 100%.
You don't want to see Roman Reigns finally drop his title, or at least defend his title more than like 2 times next year?
I could care less.
I personally would like to see a time where, and I know I don't have control over this, but how, and Evan, we've brought it up a number of times, how the people who love AEW snipe the people who love the WWE, snipe the people who love Impact, snipe the people who love New Japan. And there's this tribalism of wrestling. Like, you can't watch AEW and the WWE. You have to love the AEW and hate the WWE, or love the WWE and hate AEW, and that the fans are all sniping each other, and that it's all exclusive. You either love one fed and you have to hate everything else. And when I was younger, I couldn't get my hands on enough wrestling. Whether it was whether it was AWA, whether it was NWA, whether it was World Class, whether it was WWF, whether it was friggin' AAA, I would watch it because I just wanted to see stuff going on in the ring. And it seems like we've gotten more towards wrestling tribalism, and that just keeps wrestling from really being something that connects with everybody, because there's people just that won't accept you if you like AEW or you like the WWE. You can't like both, and I don't understand why that is, and I hope that's something that somehow goes away, but I don't think it will. Because
if I can add to that point.
No, I'm not going to sleep tonight. Thanks.
Yeah.
But yeah, to your point though, when I was growing up, AWA, NWA, WF, World Class.
I know you froze.
I couldn't get enough. I didn't favor one more than the other. I loved everything I could watch. Once I found out what the territories were all about, growing up as a kid. So if they're classifying it now as AEW against WWE, that seems kind of silly to me.
But it is that way, at least online. Jonathan, what were you about to say?
I was going to say that I discount the online stuff to the extent that we just came out of 20-something years following the last real boom period of the late 90s, early 2000s, where there was literally, for most of us, one game in town, unless you're going to look to Japanese or Mexican wrestling. It was WWE. There was no credible second option. TNA tried but didn't have anywhere near the kind of market presence that WWE did. They'd raided the territories and the indies to the point where they'd all but dried up. And finally, we're at a point where there's options out there, where there's different places for talent to go and work and get better and move around. There's a million different people to work with. There's a million different styles out there. I like AEW and WWE because they're different from each other. And I like seeing the different presentations and the different styles of wrestling. And I like the fact that you've got MLW out there, which I don't get to see as often, or TNA, I think it's TNA now, where despite the fact that they're very clearly operating on a shoestring budget, they are putting on really crackerjack matches week after week and storylines that, considering, it's let's put on a show more than anything, it's fun to watch. And wrestling should be fun. And anybody who's wasting their time complaining about this federation or that federation or why you can like one or not has just lost the plot. Find something you like and watch it. Find everything and find something to like about it.
You could treat wrestling today as a smorgasbord. I was watching TNA the other night. Will Ospreay and Josh Alexander. It was tremendous. WWE on the right pay-per-view. You had Seth Rollins and Cody Rhodes putting on great matches. AEW, I love El Vikingo and Penta and Phoenix, and I love that flippy do. I mean, it's a smorgasbord out there. I mean, you could pick and choose, and there's no law that says if it's a 2 or 3 hour show you have to watch every minute. You could even selectively watch what you want to watch during any given show. So,
and there's also no law that you have to be madly in love with everything that's presented before you.
Of course.
I actually started writing my column because I heard people complaining about, I don't know, some segment that they just really didn't like. But you get to a point where if you're going to be a fan over the long haul, we're all. I don't know Casey terribly well, but the rest of us are all at least in our 40s and 50s and beyond that. And it's a show that hopefully appeals to us as well. But the demographic is 18 to 35. And in order to capture 18 to 35, they're going to aim younger, they're going to aim older, they're going to increasingly aim it at more diverse audiences, which is why you see more and better women's wrestling across the shows, because that's 50% of the population that's been underserved forever. So,
Russell, we're going
I don't
into
have
overtime.
to love everything.
Yeah,
you're gonna have to pay overtime.
You're gonna have to pay the union overtime.
It's a fascinating discussion. We could probably go for another hour with all these great topics, but we'll have you all on again in the future. I promise that. And here's to, maybe another 200 shows.
Can we just plug some stuff real quick?
Yeah, please, Evan, please.
Everybody read Nikita's book, man. Nikita, tell me about your book. It's tremendous.
My book, here it is, When It Was Real. And that's what I called it because that's what we said, when it was real. And it's about the WWF in the 70s. I would go into 83, but I don't have the time because, believe it or not, that took so long. It's unbelievable. But thank you, Evan. And thank you for the kind words that you put out about it, because it puts people in the seats, which is what I'm not getting rich from it. None of us get rich from any of this. But when people say thank you, it reminds me of being with my dad and my grandfather. That made it worthwhile. That's great.
I'll be ordering right now.
Thank you.
Great. That's wonderful.
And
so anyway, folks, we'll have you on again in the future.
Wait. One more quick plug.
Yeah, one more plug here, Evan.
Yeah. Evan Ginsberg's Old School Wrestling Memories. We got thousands of people on there every day talking about old school, and I got guys on there that started attending wrestling in the 1950s and 60s. This is
we're not talking about The Rock and Mankind. We're talking about the 60s and 70s and maybe the 50s. Old school.
These guys are talking about the Tolless brothers and the Graham brothers. So I found this real niche audience. So check that out, folks.
Jonathan, anything you want to
Jonathan,
promote here?
plug your column.
So my column comes up every 2 weeks. It just came out yesterday, actually. It's Wrestler's Court with Jonathan Schwartz. My latest one looks at why WWE needs to run with Jinder Mahal, of all people. Who knows what's coming in the next 2 weeks? No, the man is a national treasure.
Casey, anything you want to plug?
I just want to say thank you very much. No, I'm good. But thank you for having me on for the 200, and hope to do it again.
We'll do another Pacific Northwest show coming up soon.
And read ProWrestlingStories.com. We got 900 articles on there. 900. That'll keep you busy.
But not before you read SlamWrestling.net.
Wonderful.
Between them, we got about 2,000 articles. That'll keep people busy.
I think so. Well, thank you, everyone, for being part of the show. We'll have you all on again soon. Have a great night, everyone. See you later. Bye.